Way back when, once upon a time, phones were actually mostly for making phone calls. And way back then, there was only one phone that you would find in just about everybody's house. It was called the Western Electric 500, and it was borderline illegal to have anything else. From the Virgin Vox Media, this is Version History, a show about the best and worst and most important products in tech history. I'm David Pierce, and today we are talking about AT&T and the Monopoly phone. All right, we're back. It's time to talk landlines. Joining me in the studio, Nilay Patel.
This is my dream episode. This is my whole career is wrapped up in this little gadget right here.
Also with us, joining us remotely, is author and Columbia professor Tim Wu. Tim, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm also very excited about this topic.
So we should say, one of the reasons you're here is that you wrote a book called The Master Switch that is the basis of my research, frankly, for a lot of this episode. You also recently wrote a book called The Age of Extraction, which is very good, and about the internet, and is like, there's a lot of this story that bleeds right into that story. And I should say, we're here to talk about this phone, the Western Electric 500, both on its own merits, but also as a way to get into the history of AT&T and Western Electric and the way that this monopoly took over America in a really unusual way. And if you've never seen a landline phone, which a remarkable number of people watching and listening to this may not have, let me just describe to you what a landline phone in 1950 looked like. It's this big brick of plastic that weighs, frankly, more than you think, and it has two main things on it. There is this big handset that you hold against your ears. It has there's a microphone and a speaker, and then on this one there is a rotary dial, which is this huge wheel that you have to stick your finger in at the right number, spin it all the way around, let it go back, and then do the next number. It made dialing a phone take 6.5 hours. And this is what we did for decades. And Tim, you have a Western Electric 500. Is this true?
Yes, I do.
You are the proud owner of a landline phone?
I didn't bring it with me at this exact moment, but yes, I have that phone.
Why?
Same one. Well, partially when I was writing the book, I was like, I can't just write this thing, I have to live it. And partially because I believed some of the AT&T propaganda that the quality of the connection would be good, so I wanted it for radio interviews, back when radio interviews were on the telephone. So yeah, and I just like the way it looks.
I mean, there is really something about, like, Nilay, I encourage you to just pick up this phone and hold it to your hand.
It's all I've been
there
wanting
is something
to do. My God.
astounding about how good it feels in your hand.
This move where you can pick up the bass and walk around with the handset on your ear and you're just holding the bass. This is power. Whatever this feeling
Pacing
is,
back and forth in your office, doing deals.
Just holding this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're like, get out of my face. Like, I don't know. We got to bring this back.
How much heavier is that thing than you remember?
It's so heavy.
It's monstrous.
I mean, that's where the power comes from. It's like, this is weighty. You're making a decision to hold this thing.
100%. Okay, so let's actually sort of start the history here, because it turns out we have to start at the Civil War, which means we have a fair amount of work to do before we get to this phone. When we started this show, I did not expect to tell this many stories about the immediate aftermath of the Civil War. But here we are. And so the thing that was happening in the Civil War was the telegraph was a huge deal. This became a revolution in how people shared information. And in particular, for our purposes here, I'm interested in this company called Gray and Barton at the very beginning of all of this, which was a manufacturing partner to Western Union, which at the time was the telegraph company. For a long time, Western Union was the biggest company in America. It was the most important information company anywhere. Gray and Barton made a lot of stuff for a lot of companies. They were just like a contract manufacturer, but their best business was with Western Union and in telegraphs. And in particular, I learned after the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, Western Union's headquarters burned down, but Gray and Barton didn't. So they just basically leaned on them even harder, and they became like a crucial part of the telegraph ecosystem. One of the founders of the company, Elisha Gray, I think is how you pronounce it, he's the Gray of Gray and Barton, decides that he wants to sell his part of the company to Western Union. But he also says, there's this amazing thing that I've just done. I've invented the telephone. He didn't call this at the time, but he was in this patent war, it turned out, to invent the telephone. And this becomes this incredibly long legal saga that, Tim, you write a fair amount about in The Master Switch. Can you walk us through it a bit?
Well, I think most of us learn in elementary school that Alexander Graham Bell, this the kind of eccentric living in a attic, invented the telephone. But if you look a little more carefully, The fact is, a lot of people invented the telephone all at once, one of them being Gray. The Germans, to this day, believe that they invented the telephone. There is another kind of anecdotal account of somebody else inventing a telephone even earlier, but not doing anything with it. So there's a lot of people who kind of arrived at the same, invention point at the same time, which is they realized you could carry voice over a wire and then amplify the signals on the other side. It really came down, in terms of who was, quote, the inventor, to the question of who won the patent battle, and at some level, who reached the patent office first. There was some of this history is a little anecdote or mythical, because I want to say that Bell and AT&T had a pretty effective propaganda department.
Agreed.
And in fact, history would have been very different if they had lost that patent battle, but in the end, they won it.
Yeah, so this patent becomes like the thing that builds AT&T. Like for decades, it uses this patent to win every fight against everybody else who wanted to do this kind of thing. Because I think the everybody invented it all at the same time is sort of a constant story in the history of science and technology. Like, there are so many things that seem like just an idea whose time has come. And the telephone just seems like it was an idea whose time has come. And a bunch of people all around the world at roughly the same time came to that idea. I found so many salacious allegations in this patent warfare where, like, there's some allegation that Alexander Graham Bell's lawyer had some leverage on the patent office so that they got secrets about what was in Gray's patent in order to redo their patent. And it becomes this whole like patent drama. And at the end of all of this legal drama, that becomes a huge piece of what happens here, because this fight between Bell and Western Union, which had bought Electra Gray's company, and so it picks up this fight on his behalf. Western Union essentially agrees to get out of the telephone market. They're like, this is, we don't care. Leave us alone. We're going to go do our thing. You do yours. Let's just sort of split the market here. You go build the telephone, knock yourself out. And there was this sense of like, they saw it as somewhere between an interesting lark maybe for someday if a bunch of things happen, and kind of a waste of time. And their interest was doing better telegraphs, not cannibalizing telegraphs. And they actually saw the telephone, in the best case, as a problem. And so they're like, well, we're happy to just get out of the market.
Yeah.
So anyway, so at the end of all this, the other thing that happens is Bell buys a majority share of Western Electric, which is the company that Gray and Barton had turned into. This is the manufacturing arm. So just to clarify, Western Union is the old telegraph company. Western Electric used to make parts for Western Union, but now they make parts for Bell. Western Electric at this point becomes the sole supplier of Bell's telephones and equipment. This becomes a very big deal. This is a small deal at the time because Bell is still a new company. It's growing fast. There's a sense that this is onto something, but this becomes an enormous deal. Western still made stuff for other companies, but over time it becomes basically the supplier to AT&T. These two things are not the same company, but boy, are they the same company.
Yeah.
Which again becomes very much the story of AT&T.
Yeah, this is a pattern that
decades.
exists across the telecom industry, right? Like Samsung is the preferred supplier to so many cell carriers today.
Right.
There was a time when LG made every phone for a handful of cell carriers. Nokia was this supplier. BlackBerry, famously, and Verizon had this kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Only recently has that changed.
Okay, so Tim, I want you to do something impossible, which is just absolutely blast through about 50 years of history.
Okay.
Walk us through just very quickly how we get from Bell Labs upstart to AT&T absolutely, utterly dominant player in telephony in the course of just a few decades.
Okay. So believe it or not, it turned out the telephone was popular. and people thought, this thing is pretty cool. Eventually, Bell's patent expired, and there came a period that could only be compared to like the 1990s internet, where everyone was starting a phone company. There were suddenly thousands of phone companies across the United States. And people were using all kinds of wire. Like there's some vaguely anecdotal accounts of people using like barbed wire fences to rig parts of their phone networks together. So the idea was, young man, go west and build a phone network. And so there they were all going. And there was this period of extraordinary both opportunity, hope, interesting inventions, different ideas, but also a lot of chaos and non-interconnected networks. Because obviously, a phone is a network. Its value is how many people are on it. At some point, Bell got new leadership, a man named Theodore Vail. He was a fellow who kind of took Theodore Roosevelt as his role model, although he probably thought he was better than Theodore Roosevelt. He was like the big man, the like empire building, the visionary kind of person. And he said something along the lines that like America needs one phone network. And this was his one network philosophy. And so in service of that vision, he commenced what can only be described as industrial warfare. Actually, not entirely unlike John Rockefeller, who's another figure active in this era. He went to every place and convinced the independents to either sell to him, the independent phone manufacturers, join up with him on some kind of terms, or face their destruction. There's at least one account. Now, people in the 19th century, as I said, there's a lot of propaganda on both sides. But there are at least stories of Bell, demanding everyone sell out to them, join the Bell network, and those that refuse have their equipment put in the middle of town and lit a fire in a giant bonfire as a horrible lesson for all those who would resist the Bell system. So he had a kind of a simple message. He said, we're better together, join me, maybe be bought by me, certainly interconnect on my terms and join the one system. So this spreads. Bell begins to invest heavily in long distance, which is obviously an important technology.
And is also, pretty expensive and hard for all of these little barbed wire phone companies to match.
Yeah, although to their credit, some of them are smaller, some of them are more efficient. In a way, they could coexist if they agreed to interconnect. And those days, interconnect is a physical wire that, switches between them. But yes, there's a lot going on. Important here is you have AT&T, the growing monopoly, and eventually this attracts the attention of the Justice Department because then, and to some degree now, the idea of attacking your competitors and merging them into a giant trust is considered to violate the Sherman Act. So the Taft administration begins an investigation after Roosevelt and pre-Wilson. The Taft administration, which actually is the most aggressive antitrust administration, begins an investigation of AT&T for the crime of monopolization. And, they begin the lawsuit. The two parties are getting ready for a big fight. And at some point, this is in the 1910s, they begin to negotiate and they announce a deal, which is known as the Kingsbury Commitment. And the deal roughly goes like this. Bell will interconnect with everybody. So on its side, it's going to agree to support everybody. But sort of more or less subtly, the United States agrees that Bell will be the monopoly, regulated monopoly for the United States. So we strike this deal. At the time, I should say, all the independent phone companies see it as a victory because now they have interconnection. But what they don't fully realize is that the gem or the idea of one monopoly for the nation has won out. And, there is some logic to the idea that one network makes more sense than 1,000 networks.
Right. That is, to me, the most interesting thing about this growth story. And I felt it doing the research. I felt it in your book, Tim. You go through and it's like, okay, AT&T is waging industrial warfare. It is this ruthless, growth-oriented company trying to connect everybody. And then you listen to Theodore Vail be like, but actually this whole thing is better if we're all on one network and we can all talk to each other. And you're like, crap. You're right.
He was super right.
Nilay, you're Mr. Free Market Competition over here. What do you make of all of this?
I am always struck by the character of Theodore Vail, of Rockefeller, of Carnegie, who all were brash, extremely aggressive monopolists. Right? I mean, they're the monopoly guys.
Yeah, literally.
That's who they are.
Yeah.
And at the end, they all accepted the notion that they should run regulated monopolies. And I think Vail makes that case pretty directly to the government in the context of all of this antitrust battle. He says, you can be in charge of this network, but I have to build it.
Right.
I will accept your price controls on this network. I will accept what we would come to call common carrier rules, where I have to connect to everyone and I can't monkey with the what's going across the network. You look at a telecom company today, and the idea that the government can tell them anything to do with their network is out the window.
Right.
Like that is battle after battle. And so there's just this the literal character of these figures. There's something about their their patriotism that actually balanced out their like viciousness. And that's the argument that they made so often.
Yeah, there's a real sense of noblesse obligée that I think is important here. I mean, he's an industrialist, Vail, and AT&T is a rapacious company. But he, comes and basically speaks to the public, to Congress, to the administration, and says, I shall serve as a public servant. I agree and will commit myself to connect every American at low cost. I accept rate regulation. I accept, being more or less like the post office in many ways. At that time, the post office was admired for its efficiency, I should point out. And, so he undertakes these duties. He offers a big deal, and he said, we will all be better together. And I think that is the seed of the age of regulated monopoly, which ends up lasting roughly 70 years.
Yeah. So that was an excellent catch up, by the way. Good job, Tim. So this brings us to this like enlightened monopoly phase for AT&T, which is the phrase that is used kind of all over. AT&T was basically like given the ability to do whatever it wants. And then in 1921, there's this thing called the Willis-Graham Act that essentially just tells AT&T that it's cool. Like, don't worry about it. We have all these other monopoly rules. You are exempt from them. No problem. And also, by the way, the Kingsbury commitment, which AT&T made, big win for all of the like little companies that didn't have to risk dying. So this works for everybody for a long time. And the network continues to grow. AT&T continues to become this massively giant company. So we go through the First World War, we go through the Depression, we go through the Second World War, and then there are just a lot of political changes during that time. But then we get to the late 40s, and the U.S. government sues AT&T again. We're just doing monopoly stuff again. And in this case, the goal is to separate AT&T from Western Electric. This is where we start to get into landline phones. Because what the government wanted was to force AT&T to buy from other manufacturers. AT&T obviously was very happy to buy from its own subsidiary. And to your point about a lot of these regulations, there was an understanding that you could regulate the cost of service by regulating the cost of service. But actually, AT&T had a bunch of other ways to make as much money as it wanted. And one of them is by controlling the hardware, by doing the price of the hardware, the services, the leasing fees. Like, people didn't own their phones. You didn't buy a phone. You leased one from AT&T, which is like just a bonkers thing to think about. But it's also kind of what we all do with our iPhones now. Like, to some extent,
you can't kill AT&T. We've tried so many times. It will come back in exactly the same form.
This idea just never goes away. But so at the time, again, this is in the late 1940s. Just some of the numbers I found. The government alleged that Western Electric manufactures and sells more than 90% of all telephones, telephone apparatus, and equipment sold in the United States, and that a substantial part of the remaining 10% is produced under the direct control of Western Electric. This is the only company making phones for all intents and purposes, and it is wholly owned by AT&T.
I just want to point out, and it's like you can look at history through a variety of lenses. There was a lot going on between, 1910 and 1940. I would say there were plenty of priorities for the nation as a whole to pay attention to and rank higher than the phone system.
Yes.
There was almost zero innovation in the phone system during the time of AT&T's monopoly.
Except it grew.
That was it. Which is a huge innovation, obviously very important. But the experience of like making phone calls pretty much stagnated. Tim, I can't think of a particularly meaningful upgrade in that 30-year period because the monopoly was like, we're going to run the monopoly and extract our profits. And growth is the thing that we've promised you, so there will be growth. Right. But user experience is not a thing that we need to compete on, so we will stop.
The thing is, inside an industry, if you talk to any industry, they're always convinced that they're extremely innovative. It's just they measure it differently internally. So there was one big innovation during that period, which is they got rid of operators, human operators, and replaced them with electric switching.
Right.
So that was one. But you know what I mean? Like, the product was the same. But I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just amazed at the ability of any industry to be convinced that they have made enormous strides.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I talk to people in the airplane industry and I say, it's basically the same 50 years. They're like, what are you talking about? And then they talk about a whole bunch of things that no one on the outside experiences as real changes.
And all of them, I would point out, even in the case of the operators, is reducing labor cost.
Yep. But like Tim, what you're saying, this is, I do think you're right that probably counts as a meaningful innovation. The idea of like you giving people this kind of control, it reduced labor costs. It made things a lot easier for AT&T because you didn't have to have these centralized offices connecting people, especially as the networks got bigger. The operating system became like huge and complicated, and being able to just let people dial onto the network was actually really valuable to everybody. But the other thing that's happening here is that AT&T is actually going out of its way to prevent anyone else from doing any kind of innovation. Tim, you covered the story of the Hushaphone. Do you remember the story of the Hushaphone?
Oh, yes, I do very, very well. So you're right. AT&T, in some ways, as we've sort of suggested, they're an admirable company, and some that I want to point that out in some ways. It's true they were not improving the product at all, but they were trying to get the product to everybody. Sometimes I must confess, like anything you spend a lot of time with, you end up with a mix, some admiration. And AT&T monopoly, in some ways, reminds me of the Roman Empire, in the sense that, like, I do not approve of feeding people to lions or gladiator contests or massacring villagers. But there is still something mighty and exciting about building roads to every part of Europe. So I have the same kind of feelings about AT&T. One of the things I will say about AT&T is it was very controlling. They had the idea that they had to own every part of their system from top to bottom. And that meant you should not attach your own telephones. One thing that people may not realize, there was not a phone jack back then. It was just a wire coming out of the wall. Right. So it wasn't like if you wanted to hit up your own phone, you needed to be able to, splice wires or something like that. Anyway, a bunch of people in the 1950s invented something called the Hushaphone. And the Hushaphone was this plastic device that fit over the receiver and made it so that people around you were not bothered by your phone calls, if that makes sense.
It really is just a gigantic piece of plastic.
This big piece of plastic that came out was actually originally invented in the 1920s. They did an advanced version of it. They consulted with this fellow named Leo Branach at MIT, who was an expert on acoustics. He later went on to help invent the internet. They invented this sort of improved model. And Bell freaked out and said, we cannot have foreign attachments on our network. They went and they began threatening that they would disconnect the service. So they didn't have the power to sue people, but they did have the power to threaten to disconnect the service of anyone who used this foreign attachment. And ultimately, it went to a suit. The FCC, first went along and they went back and forth. So grudgingly, they ended up having a lawsuit over whether a hearing over whether the Hushaphone actually interfered with phone communications, and ultimately it didn't. And there was it all went all the way to the D.C. Circuit, and it came down ultimately to a kind of a landmark decision of the D.C. Circuit, where they said an unwarranted interference with the telephone subscriber's right reasonably to use his telephone in ways which are privately beneficial without being publicly detrimental can't be interfered with. So AT&T finally had a little bit of pushback on their entirely encompassing control freak nature.
Yeah, but that takes a while. Crucially, that takes a long time, and it about ruins the life of the Hushaphone creators in trying to do this. But they did. They decided basically we have to fight this fight all the way out because we think it's important, and they do eventually win their day in court. But it takes them a long time and an awful lot of money. And in that space, actually, while AT&T is fighting this fight, is when this phone comes out. And so let's get to this phone, but first let's take a break. Then we're going to talk some hardware. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Let's talk about a designer named Henry Dreyfuss, who is somebody I had never heard of before, but turns out to be a bit of a legend in the design world. So this guy, he's a New York guy. He's a designer. He works on Broadway plays. He eventually opens a firm to do industrial design and ends up designing some truly iconic stuff. This guy is in like the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s doing work, and his big idea is, what if we made things that were human-centric? What if the design was useful to people and also looked nice? And so he ends up designing a bunch of like truly iconic things. One of them is this vacuum called the Hoover 150, one of the first vacuums to have basically be all contained like this and cleaner and simpler and less designed. He also designs the Honeywell T87 thermostat, which is like the iconic shadow of a thermostat. So this guy is like doing big, important work. And he eventually, at the end of all this, goes to work for AT&T. So at this point, in the 1930s, Bell Labs had released a phone called the Western Electric 300, itself a bit of an icon in the annals of landline phones. They're making this transition away from the old, they called them candlestick phones, those are the two pieces. You hold the one up to your ear and the other one down here as you talk into it. That had been the design of phones for forever. And right before the Great Depression, Bell Labs had done this big design reboot of all of its phones. There was still a second box, like you were talking about. There's the phone on the desk, and then there's a thing stuck to the wall, basically, that is where a lot of the actual equipment is, and also is how you connect to the network. The wars happen, and the Great Depression happens, and so there's this giant pause in a lot of development. But then this stuff comes like roaring back in the 30s and into the 40s. And again, Tim, like you were saying earlier about kind of ideas all happening at once, everybody thinking about this kind of device around the world, right? Because AT&T is not the only company in the world doing telephony. Everybody starts to think about, plastics, which are becoming a thing, and new kinds of transmitters, and new things are being cheap to manufacture. So everybody starts consolidating on this idea of like, how do we make something a little smaller, a little simpler, and how do we put it all into one device rather than the phone being sort of this like big wacky system that lives in your house? They're like, how do we just make it a thing? The other thing about the Western Electric 300 was that it was like really, really, really nice to hold. Bell Labs and others had done a lot of ergonomics research, and people were starting to make more and longer phone calls. So the idea of like making this a nice experience was really important. So they're like, how do we make this more and more pleasant? So they come up with a bunch of little things, like the fact that when you pick it up, the speaker actually covers most of your ear, but it has this sort of concave thing so that it actually puts a cup around your ear that it makes the sound better. It puts your mouth right on the microphone by design. Like you kind of can't put the microphone anywhere else. So that makes it sound better. They understood the phone as a physical object for the first time, which I think is really cool. This is like the end of doing it because it is what the technology requires, and into like, actually, we have a bunch of options. How do we make this a lifestyle object?
Yeah.
Which I think is very cool and leads to a lot of these changes. If you go all the way back on AT&T's YouTube channel, a thing that I had occasion to do, they uploaded a bunch of like old archival, basically infomercials. Like AT&T would make these long movies explaining to people how things would work, and they would play them at the beginning of like movie theater movies to help people understand how phones worked. Can I just play you a couple of them to give you a sense of like what innovation looked like at this time? Yeah. It's delightful.
For convenience in dialing, the letters go around the dial in alphabetical order, and the numbers are in numerical order, from 1 to 9 and O. And in the center of the dial appears the number of the telephone you are using.
With dial service, telephone numbers consist of a central office name and 5 numbers, like this:
Main 2 9970.
This is like, there was a time not that long ago that you had to explain to somebody that the numbers go up in order. Do you know what I mean?
By the way, straight line from here to those first videos that Apple produced about the iPhone.
Yes.
Where they're like, here's how you unlock it.
Very much so.
We've gotten away from this.
Yeah. So in 1946 is all of this is going on. AT&T starts working with Henry Dreyfuss's company. They spend a couple of years sketching ideas. They test with customers. And eventually, this thing starts to hit in 1949. This is the Western Electric 500. This is a big, giant deal of a device. And they launch it as such. They understand that they have done something important and powerful. And there are a bunch of new things inside of this. So like one way I would think about it is you have the base plate inside of the phone. There's a lot of like really complicated mechanics. And actually, we sent Andrew Marino, our producer, to the Long Island Telephone Museum, where there are actual, honest to God, old phone experts who did a much better job of explaining it. So let me just play this video that Andrew made for us.
Okay, I'm here at the Long Island Telephone Museum, and I'm here with the curator historian, John Stallone. Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great.
Welcome.
We are gonna take a demo look at the Western Electric 500. We're gonna actually open one up and take a look and see how it all works.
Exactly. All of the inner workings and how the magic occurs.
Okay, great.
So in 1954, it's a huge pivotal year for the telephone company. This is the first time that the 500 set now is available in a variety of 8 different colors.
We have a pink one in our office, actually.
Very nice.
Yeah.
A pink one is rare. It would have been special ordered.
Oh, okay, cool.
This new type of telephone has a thing called a varistor inside of it. So the varistor is a combination of 2 words. It's a varying resistor. And this now allows that phone to be placed at any distance from the central office, whether it's close, where it would have a more powerful current coming to it, or the further away, where it would have a less powerful current from it.
Gotcha.
And normally when you're making a call or somebody would bang the phone down and hang up on you, you'd hear that loud click in your ear. That varistor prevented that from happening. It also now, for the very first time, allows you to make your ringer louder or lower.
Can we also talk about the plug here?
In 1954, you could actually move your phone about your house wherever you might want it. If you wanted an outdoor jack on your patio, you were able to have that installed and then take your phone from inside and plug it into this little 4-prong jack on the outside. Prior to that, your phone was hardwired to the wall.
Right.
So, strangely enough, if you had one of these, even back in those days, you'd be able to unscrew it very simply from underneath, 2 screws. But now we're going to uncover and look on the inside
Whoa.
of where all the magic happens. So we spoke about the bell earlier, and here's where you will be able to actually see it moving closer and further away from where the clapper is. That's in the center there.
Just to pause really fast. This is such a perfect example of like the simplicity of the system that you're talking about. It's just how far are the bells from each other?
Yeah.
They found so many like little tiny ingenious things to do here that make all of this sort of complicated stuff actually unbelievably simple mechanics.
Yes. And they can just fix it.
Yeah. It's very clever.
It's very good.
This is a giant magnet. And basically what's happening when the phone rings, 90 volts AC is being applied across the line. And it's exciting this magnet where it's actually
Right.
changing polarity to make that ringer be pulled back and forth.
Right, and so that's the only way it's getting powers through the phone line, correct?
It's actually coming through the regular wire that's coming in from the outside. The telephone works off of a thing called negative 48 volts DC. The ringer actually works off of 90 volts AC.
Okay, so how does that get power then?
So that power is coming from the central office with a big generator that was inside there, a ringing generator. And when you were going to get a call, it would send that ringing current across the line, excites the ringer. Now you're hearing. Okay, so at that point, the circuit's closed. This is your switch hook. You're going to, it's actually open and you pick it up.
So yeah, when you pick up the phone, this goes
Circuit's
up.
closed in, and then boom, you're answering your call. Hello? Who's there?
Can you walk through the dialing mechanism?
So I didn't disconnect it, but I could show it to you, actually. You could do a little work here and take this off.
Cool.
All right, so now we can kind of see the back of the dial. So every time you're making a call, this governor is spinning, creating an opening closing of the circuit, creating pulses for each number that correlates to what you spin. So if you were to do 9, of course, it would open and close the circuit 9 times. If you go to 0, that's 10. So that would be 10 times opening, closing every time. The magic that happens behind the scenes after you spin that little wheel on your phone is translated all the way back to the central office, a building that's approximately a quarter of a mile away from probably where your home is. And when you pick up your phone and you're dialing your number, this is going to register in the central office the number.
Oh, So when we saw the clicks in the phone, it's kind of relaying that same signal
to here.
Right.
So every time those contacts open and close, it's registering a click inside the central office until you reach the number of clicks for your telephone number. 7 numbers. At that point, you're calling within the scene area of your central office, and now it's going to translate it to the phone that needs to be getting ringed. So now the phone's ringing at the other location, you hear that ring, you pick up the phone, and now you're able to have your conversation. When you hang up, it resets, and it waits for the next time or the next person who needs that line finder to be able to go and make the next call.
Well, thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Yeah, this was so fun. I learned so much. Back to you, David. Say hi to David.
Hi, David.
Great, thank you.
First of all, John is my hero.
That dude rules.
Yeah, I aspire to that kind of knowledge about literally anything. But I think there's so much of that is exactly this thing that we've been talking about. That it's this whole system that is the point, right? Like Tim, you and Nilay have both been talking about the Bell system.
Yeah.
This is the system. It's all those parts.
It's all mechanical.
Yeah.
It's a big mechanical system, and it all has to work together exactly right. And I think that's where their like weirdo control freak nature came from. Like there's no slack in this system.
Right.
You can just like knock the thing out of alignment and then the phone's broken.
And you can see how you would make a compelling argument that actually if we let somebody else into this system, they'll screw it up.
Yeah.
It is very complicated and put together.
But also they should have let more people.
So all of this stuff is some of it is new and some of it is just vast improvements over how all of this stuff works. The fact that you can control the volume, the fact that you can, like you were doing earlier, you can pick it up and carry it around is like meaningful to people's experience with these phones. This becomes, I think, crucial to how people think about their relationship with their phones for decades.
Yep.
Right? Like this is in so many ways the like iconic moment of phones were already mainstream, but this changes people's relationship to them in a way that I'm still like wrapping my head around because this is the phone in so many ways.
Yeah, it is the picture of a phone. It was the icon of a phone on cell phones for years and years and years.
Yeah.
The idea that you would have more than one of them in your house that arrived with this device. The idea that it's in colors.
Yeah.
And that it is a consumer object made of plastic. I mean, it really just changed everyone's relationship with the phone in serious ways. They
fixed a bunch of the things in it to make it more serviceable. A huge part of the goal of all of this for AT&T is to make these phones easier to service because this is all still at this point kind of brittle technology.
Yeah.
And so they're spending
and it's very mechanical.
Right. And so they're spending a lot of money and a lot of time like going to people's houses and they have these huge repair shops that people are repairing the phones in. Like this thing is a lot of work. So anything they can do to make it easier to get inside and fix is a huge deal. So this one, like you can literally just lift this cover off with a couple of screws and see all of the internals right there. And that's a big deal, right? Like there's a real repairability aspect to the thing. There are a couple of other little design things I just want to point out. One of them is that on the dial here, before the numbers had been inside of the dial. So when you would put your finger in, it would obscure the numbers. So it was actually hard to see.
Yeah.
So on this one, they put the numbers around the outside and then they're actually part of the plastic. But then in testing, they discovered that people didn't know where to put their fingers anymore. So they put these dots inside.
Oh, that's what the dots are for.
In order to just, those are like places for your finger to land because people didn't know where to actually put the thing because it was hard to navigate from the number to the circle. I want to play maybe the most iconic and most lasting thing that happened from this device, which is Travis, our producer, can you call this phone?
Oh, it's good. It's good.
I cannot describe to you how like visceral reaction I have to that ring.
And it's mechanical. There's a bell in there that's being struck by a striker, and you can feel it's vibrating the table. It's so good.
Where does that take both of you? I just immediately become a kid again. Like
yeah, I'm home in the 80s, and I'm running down the stairs because the phone was in the kitchen, right? And again, this is like, eventually there are more phones in the house, and this stops being such a thing. But that sound is run to the kitchen.
Yep. Same.
Can I just say the word operator here printed on the side? It's so jaunty. Like this thing has whimsy to it. It's good.
Whimsy.
Yeah.
It's true. It's lovely.
You know, kind of reminds me design-wise a little bit of like the Porsche 911.
Yeah.
Or the Volkswagen Bug. It has kind of a, it's roughly the same era, a kind of rounded design that really lasted and became classic.
Yeah, it's got that jet age feel, right? We're entering into, we're going to streamline everything.
Totally.
We're going to cut through the water with the greatest of ease.
A lot of rounded corners.
Yeah.
I think there's also a case to be made that this was the best sounding phone of all time. Like it's useful to remember for many people watching and listening to this, you've never heard a good sounding phone call.
Never.
Like it's honestly true. But there was a long time where phone calls sounded awesome.
Yeah.
We had these super high fidelity lines that were able to carry almost uncompressed speech. Like it sounded amazing. And there was something meaningfully, like emotionally different about a phone call.
The phone companies used to compete on the quality of their phone calls.
Yeah.
This is long since gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's the thing about the story of innovation, which, I've been very critical of AT&T, but to give them their credit, they just, in some ways, innovated in different ways. Like they innovated in terms of trying to have the perfect like phone quality and the perfect reliability. Like the big deal for them was that every time you picked up the phone, you'd get a dial tone, not like 9 out of 10 times or 5. And,
right.
On our current network's pretty advanced. Occasionally a phone call just fails. And to them, that was, that should never happen.
Right.
So they were going for a different ideal. Let's just put it that way.
Well, it's an interesting incentive matchup, right? Because if you're AT&T and you're Western Electric, because of the way your business works, because you lease these phones to people, every one of their incentives was to make these things awesome and last forever.
Yep.
Because it was much cheaper in the long run for them to do that than to make crappy things that broke. Like if they could make great things that didn't break, they would ultimately be vastly more successful.
Because they were collecting rent forever.
Right, which is like, feel about that however you want, but it did incentivize them to make the phone great.
Yeah.
And they did.
Yes.
Tim, politically and business-wise, what's happening through this phase, right? Is this phase of the Western Electric 500 also sort of the dawn of the end of the enlightened monopoly of AT&T here?
That period, the 1950s, is sort of remembered, I think, by people, sort of Mad Men kind of era, a lot of big business. But it was also the most active period of antitrust enforcement, maybe in U.S. history, 50s and 60s. They were extremely aggressive. And one of the reasons is they were reacting to World War II, and the sense was that the Nazis and the Japanese Empire had been built on the back of monopoly. And there was a lot of worry that, somehow monopoly and over-monopolization of industry was going to start to bleed into fascism in the United States in some way. And so there's this aggressive thing, and it spills over into AT&T. And they say, hey, we have this company. It's huge. It's really powerful. It's politically connected. They're sort of dangerous. Let's take a run at them. This is the Justice Department talking in the 50s. And, this is crazy. How is it that they own the Western Electric Company? Those obviously could be two different companies. Around the same time, they had just broken up the film industry into producers and theaters. They said, film. They just changed the film industry so that the big studios couldn't own everything in a vertically integrated fashion. So they took a run at it. And, I think this is one of the most important periods in U.S. technological history, period, not just this telephone. Because the Justice Department takes a big run at AT&T. They have them on the ropes. They're going to break them up. And in those days, breakups were relatively common. And AT&T pleads and, frankly, gets the Defense Department involved in this whole decision-making in the federal government. And the Defense Department says, you can't break up AT&T. They're too important to national defense. They help us operate our nuclear laboratories. They do the early warning system against Soviet missiles. Spare them. So they intervene, and they arrive at this agreement, which, as I keep saying, might be one of the most consequential for U.S. tech history, the 1956 consent decree. Because in that, AT&T agrees to stay out forever of computing. They're like, let us have our monopoly. Let us, continue to provide wonderful service for the American people and own everything, but allow us to we'll stay out of everything but telephony. And the other most important thing is they force them to license every single patent they own for free. And one of those patents is the transistor patent. And a whole bunch of people then quit Bell Labs, AT&T, and start transistor companies, including Shockley and a few others, eventually Intel. And so there's two industries that are born in that exact period in this fight over the telephone. The U.S. computing industry gets a big boost by getting the phone company out, so IBM gets its real start, and the U.S. semiconductors industry. So that little phone on your desk has some role in birthing two of the most important U.S. industries. And actually, some of the guys in that patent end up writing Unix. There's a whole bunch of things can be linked just to that moment and just to that agreement where they let Bell keep its telephone, but frees up the rest of the tech world.
Are we going to talk about Carter phone? I want Tim to talk about Carter phone before he has to go. It's like the heart of the whole game to me. Amazing about this device, and Tim has mentioned several times now, is it's hardwired into the network. Well, eventually you just want to plug a modem directly into the phone network. Eventually we get to RJ11 connectors and we're plugging all kinds of devices. We have 1980s cordless phones. All of that was the fight. Like when I think about the history of this device, what undid it was an ecosystem of other phones that AT&T had to be forced into allowing to connect to their network. And once they were forced into allowing other phones, they had to be forced into modems. And then then it's all over. And that's a decision, right, Tim? That's a fight. Can you talk about that fight?
Yeah, sure. So it was actually similar to the Hushaphone fight, but with longer lasting consequences. So Carter phone made an acoustic coupler that connected to a radio, which was, a way of connecting the phone to the radio network. AT&T, as usual, freaked out and said, that's a foreign attachment. It's dangerous to our network. It cannot be allowed. And Carter phone had enough resources and, times were changing. There it is. And they fought it out. And it went all the way to the DC circuit. The FCC now had switched sides and was on the side of the innovators. And so eventually, through a court order by the DC circuit, AT&T was forced to acknowledge the possibility of things connecting to its network. Now that sets into event a whole string of events that I think are very important. The FCC at this point is starting to wonder about this paradigm of regulated monopoly and thinking that, well, maybe we can keep the monopoly, but allow a little bit of competition in long distance and a little bit of competition on the handset or the attachment side. And they do something pretty radical, but with extraordinarily long-lasting consequences, which is they come out with a rule that compels AT&T to install phone jacks in people's houses.
Right.
The phone jack is one of those things in daily life, along with the electric plug, that is so radically essential to the history of technology that it's surprising we don't wonder at it more often. Because think of what it is. It is an interconnection, an interface that costs no money to connect with and is universal and totally permissionless. So suddenly people can plug stuff in the mid-70s into this phone jack and, it doesn't spread everywhere at once. That is what, in some ways, sets off the modern telecom revolution, along with long distance and the first net neutrality rules. And it comes from just this, humble device. And if I'll say one more thing about it, AT&T, they're like this grumpy old man at this point who just keeps doubling down because they go on a tear. And even though they're forced to have this phone jack, they still insist that it's a danger to the phone network. I had a judge I worked for, Richard Posner, who went to consult for AT&T during this time. And they hired him to try to prove that all these attachments were going to be a danger to the AT&T system. And he said, well, what's it going to be? And they said, well, someone could attach something to the phone line that would send an electric current, and then a repairman who was up on a pole would get shocked.
Yep.
And go falling to his death.
This argument works for a while, by the way.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And I remember he said, does that ever happen? No, but there's always a first time. So there's always a first time. And, they had all these other things, dangerous, unhygienic, spread disease. They insist, and they refuse to comply with the FCC rules. They do all these things. They insist on people having what they call a protective coupler. So it's something you attach between the network and their devices. Their refusal to deal with, and I think this is, kind of the end point, their refusal to obey the FCC's rules on attachments is a big part of what leads to the final antitrust lawsuit that leads to their total breakup into 9 different companies. So the end of the Bell empire, the old Bell empire, is on the back of their refusal to let consumers attach, whatever they wanted to their own walls. And it came just out of this, kind of control freak mania that eventually led to a total breakup.
And I bring it back to this phone, right? This phone represents the enlightened monopoly. We're going to hire the designer. He's going to look at how people are actually using the stuff, and we're going to gently curve the inside of the handset so your ear can fit into it, and we will deliver unto you the perfect phone, and it shall remain unchanged for 40 years. And then you're like, or you could have a phone jack, and now Sony can make phones, and Panasonic can make phones, and like let 1,000 flowers bloom, and you fight against it so hard you kill yourself. And then you reform yourself like the Terminator, which is what AT&T fully did. But
that's for another day.
That version of AT&T killed itself over not letting people compete with this device. And I think that is just so fascinating because, again, this thing is fully mechanical. It is obvious how it works. If you wanted to make a phone that connected to AT&T's network and worked exactly like this one, all you have to do is open it up, which is very easy to do, look at it and say, well, this is how it works. I can make my own. Yep. And it wasn't, cryptographic signatures or DRM or secret passcodes or whatever. It was, we're going to take you to court and kill you. Yeah. And they were just really, really good at that to keep people from using their network.
I mentioned ancient Rome, but there's certainly something of a Greek tragedy to the whole story about it. There was something beautiful and admirable about the AT&T empire, but ultimately their hubris, their desire to, be the one perfect network to control everything, that ultimately led to their downfall. This has been a terrific topic. I wish we had another couple hours to talk about the inner workings of AT&T.
The good news is we'll have more chances, but for now, Tim, we should let you go. You've got fancy government things to do. But thank you again, Tim. Hope all goes well.
Appreciate it.
Hey guys, it's been great. I enjoyed it. Goodbye.
All right, we got to take one more break, and then Nilay and I are going to come back and do the version history questions. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. It's time, as always, to do the 8 version history questions, the question we ask about every product. Nilay, it's just you and me.
Yeah.
We will carry on Tim's legacy. The first question, as always, is the time matrix, a concept everyone loves and has no questions about. This is we're plotting ideas against time. Was this the right idea at the right time? The right idea at the wrong time? Wrong idea, wrong time.
What's the most this can be? This is the most right idea at the most right time.
You think so?
Yeah.
This phone in particular. So what I want to do is I want to divorce like the bigger picture everything from this, and I want to specifically talk about like this phone in 1949 and 1950.
Yeah. I'm saying it's the most right idea at the most right time. Imagine if like Mark Zuckerberg had your best interests in heart. Do you know what I mean? Like this is the product of enlightened monopoly in that post-war period. Like America is at its fullest flower and this phone exists.
I will say it was the single most interesting thing about researching this whole thing was, and we talked about this a little bit, is like, I think I believe Theodore Vail when he said he actually cares about people and wants to do a good job and make a nice thing for everybody. Yeah. I also think he made a lot of money on the way, but I also think like a lot of this, our whole country is premised on the idea that you can do good and make a lot of money, and that those two things can exist together. And
I mean,
these
are the guys who are like getting out of their weird, like streamlined limousines and like kicking nickels to the street urchins, right? Like,
it wasn't all great, but I think the idea of like we want you to regulate us, but we think we can build the best network and that actually everybody benefits from the network being fully connected. I buy that whole theory all at once in ways I did not expect to coming into this. But what I wonder about where this goes on the matrix, I think right idea is very clear, right? Like this thing was this represented like the absolute maximum vision of something. I think if you take away all the stuff you're talking about in like the 20s, 30s, and 40s, right, where there were other priorities, there was this huge sort of stop in innovation because of the Great Depression. Could AT&T have gotten to this idea 20 years sooner and had something even more powerful happen as a result? Could we have like sped up a century of innovation if AT&T had gotten to this thing sooner?
No, I really don't think so. I mean, this thing is a marvel of plastics engineering.
It's true.
Right? It's a marvel of like electronic miniaturization. There's a whole bunch of just World War II era defense spending embodied in this phone.
Yeah.
And maybe if all of history was different, but like in the timeline we live in, I'm saying this is the right product culturally. It represents, I think Tim called it noblesse oblige. Mm-hmm. Like it represents a different attitude towards the responsibility of billionaires across the board. And it hit at a time when all the people in the post-war period were interested in new ideas, in new connections, in new ways of like. It just doesn't get better than this moment, I don't think.
Yeah, I think I agree. This might be the most up and to the right we've ever had on this show.
Yeah.
The way you describe it. All right, right idea, right time. I feel good about it. All right, question number 2. Was this peak anything? I think this, more than most, has the chance to do a lot of things, and I want to offer you several.
Okay.
Was this peak phone ringer? I just want, I want to point out, this was, you can still, Andrew Marino, our producer, pointed out to me this morning, this ringer exists on the iPhone today.
Yeah,
it's called Old Phone.
Yeah.
You can make your phone sound like this now, and you should, because it kicks ass.
There it goes. It's not going to come through because, it's microphones, the internet, YouTube compression. In person, that physical bell ringing sounds so good.
It does.
It is just a remarkably good sounding thing, even though it still provokes in me the sense of panic that I need to run downstairs and answer the phone before my mom talks to my girlfriend.
Were you instructed on how to answer the phone? Like as a kid, did you have, I was told very specifically that I was to say, Pierce's, this is David, when I picked up the phone.
Oh,
that was how I answered the phone my whole childhood.
No, I think we were all just freestyling.
You were just like, what up? It's your boy Nilay.
Well, so my parents were doctors, so the hospital was always calling our house.
Oh, sure.
And so, like, the only thing that ever really happened was someone would ask for Dr. Patel, and I would have to say, which one?
Baller thing to say.
Both of them.
Yeah.
That was pretty good.
That is very good. Okay, so I think peak ringer is yes, for sure. Was this peak handset, just like the feeling of holding a phone? I think
Yeah, that's pretty good.
it's very good. I think it's possible that the trim line, the one that came after, was a little more sort of comfortable to do the like snuggle it between your shoulder.
The
and
trim
your
line
ear
was the one
thing.
where they started selling those big foam attachments
Yes.
that you would lean up against. I don't know. I think this one has a strong case to be made.
I do think the fact that you just immediately picked it up in one hand, put it to your ear in the other hand, and felt powerful is like there's something to that.
the
that
trim line
means
never
something.
made anybody feel powerful.
No, it didn't.
The trim line made you feel like you were trying to reschedule a flight.
The trim line, it was that, or it like you're a high school girl like lying on the ground, kicking your legs in the air. Like that's the trim line phone. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, okay, one other one that I was thinking about, and I'm curious if you have any others. Was this peak AT&T? Like, does this thing
AT&T?
represent enlightened monopoly AT&T? That version of like
Yes.
AT&T at its absolute most powerful is this phone that moment.
Yes, and I think the argument of this episode is this phone represents the beginning of the end.
I think that's right. The only case against it, I think, is like by now there is an antitrust fight started that will like the extent to which all of this stuff happens in like 18 months is nuts, right? This phone comes out and sort of establishes AT&T in people's houses in a new way. There's an antitrust fight that comes out. Hush-a-phone is going on. So like all the cracks are coming, even as AT&T is flexing its power.
Right, that's what I mean. This is
totally
the beginning
new
of the
ways.
end. This
Yeah.
is if you are AT&T and you're the enlightened monopolist, you've made this product because this is your this is you keeping your promise.
Yeah.
And then all around you is your downfall.
Right? So everybody is like creeping up the mountain towards it, but this
Yeah.
phone just sits alone at the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree. I think that's right. Did you have anything else? Peak anything?
No, I mean, fundamentally, I think this phone just represents like peak America in that way. Like,
pretty good.
It is a symbol of a particular kind of America.
And this is like everybody in today's America like longs for I would say many incorrect reasons, a moment in history that was this moment.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people who are like life was better in the 50s.
Yeah.
We did it in the 50s. There are a lot of people who correctly disagree with that assessment. But there is a very particular kind of like Americana America that is tied up in this. All right, question number 3. If you could travel back knowing everything we know now and develop it yourself, could you make the product more successful? And for you, I want to say not AT&T.
It's this product.
I'm not asking could you fix AT&T. Could you make this phone a bigger hit? And I want to offer you one idea.
Okay.
that I don't think is true, but I think is an interesting sort of counterfactual. If AT&T had embraced the idea of this as a more open ecosystem, allow the Husha phone, allow the Carter phone, like buy into the idea that actually we want to be the center of a larger gadget ecosystem around your phones, maybe this...
Oh, mine is so much dumber.
Okay.
It's so much dumber.
Okay.
You're off in the weeds.
Yeah, what do you got?
See the cord? The cord is fixed on these phones. You would just make it longer. This is the big problem with these phones. Is this cord in particular was quite short, which limited where you could put it. Eventually, when the phone jack came out and everything was sort of modular in that way, like long phone cords were an innovation.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You would see them places.
I remember you would have the one that was like high up on the wall and the cord would touch the floor.
Yes, exactly.
You have like
So
15
walk
feet
into
of
the
cord.
next room.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my one innovation for this device.
That's pretty good. I'm very much in favor of rotary dials, I think.
Okay.
Like just the idea of the work required to make a phone call is a good thing, and I think we should bring that back. You should have to know someone's number and do it for 1 whole minute before you're allowed to make a phone call.
Yeah.
That's the thing I believe. Question number 4. Will the youth ever make it cool again? And I the broadest version of this question is there a landline revolution upon us? Because I would like to very briefly make the case that it is like in very small ways kind of happening.
Yeah.
There's this company called Tin Can that has built these sort of closed networks for neighborhoods and friend groups.
Yeah, this
and
is
stuff.
the hottest
That's a big
present
hit
for the 7-year-old girls.
This
in
is
my
like a
life.
thing that is happening. But I wonder, is there a phone as A, object for phone calls, and B, dedicated phone call making device? Is there a possibility of a comeback for that?
I feel like all of this runs into the reality of how the networks themselves work. But Tin Can is like its own little weird Wi-Fi calling service.
Yeah.
If you actually want to make phone calls, like the best way to do it is to like be like a weird Bluetooth handset for a cell phone.
Yeah.
And all that sucks. I would love it if landlines made a comeback and we were all made more intentional phone calls and we would like schedule the calls the way that we used to do with my family. But it's like because there's no way to build that without a cell phone right now.
Right.
Or no efficient way or cost-effective way to do it. And you're kind of like, well, I'm just Bluetoothing into my cell phone over there. I might as well watch TikTok. So I think that the Tin Cans of the world, and this stuff is really, I've got an elementary school daughter. Like they all want these products.
Yeah.
Because we won't let them
Really?
have
Like
cell phones.
Tin Can is cool? Interesting.
It was all sold out for Christmas.
Really?
Yeah, so you
wow.
can just see that there's something else happening there. But I think that's because the parents are so opposed to giving out cell phones. So you were basically just shoving them back into the AT&T paradigm.
That's fair. This does kind of bleed into question number 5, which is what feature of this product should every current version have? To me, the answer is blindingly obvious. It's good sounding phone calls.
Yeah, obviously.
That's like
no other question.
And I think if the answer is good sounding phone calls, that bleeds back into the other thing. Like I was thinking about this with video chat, right? There's an argument to be made that there's no going back to phone calls because video chat has just eaten it alive. And if you're a young person, you associate calling somebody with looking at them.
Yeah.
Those sound like shit too.
Yeah.
Because you're holding your phone far away from your face so that you can see, which kills the sound quality. You're talking into a laptop from far away, which kills the sound quality. Like there is no version of this thing that is set up to make anything sound good. Because sounding good is not important.
Yeah.
But I honestly do believe that if you could bring back the actual fidelity that we've lost over the decades, it would make it more compelling for people to do it more often.
Oh, I absolutely know so.
Phone calls are awful.
When it changed, oddly, was the pandemic. People got so used to Zoom and they got used to this huge quality degradation because the point was just to communicate.
Right.
So you would accept almost anything as long as you could get the bare bones of communication across.
For sure.
Before that, I would do like TV hits and, if you would go on the radio or TV, all the producers would say, "Can you get to a landline?"
Oh yeah, that's true.
They would ask you every time, "Can you get to the landline?" They cared about the quality, and then the pandemic hit, and everyone was like, "Yeah, Zoom's fine." And we just have, and that's like a little marker. It's obviously not everyone's having that experience, but to me, it was when the radio producers gave up on sound quality.
Yes.
Like it was like there's no hope for anyone else. Like these are the last people in America who truly care, and like it's gone. I'm a nihilist about people caring about audio quality, as you know. I don't know if that one's coming back.
I think you're right, but I wish it would.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of things would get better if it did. All right, now we have 3 questions left. These are the Version History Hall of Fame questions. A product has to pass all 3 of these tests to make it into the Version History Hall of Fame. Question number 1, did this product do something truly new? Again, not AT&T. This is the Western Electric 500, about which I actually think this question is harder than a lot of episodes we do.
This is very difficult. I would say yes. To your point about design, right? This is a designed consumer product in a way that the previous generations were driven by the technology instead of the user interface.
I think I agree. I think there is a case to be made that the answer is yes for the one before this, that actually this is the iteration on a brand new idea that is ultimately what makes these things successful. But I think there is some combination of like you could control the loudness of it. The dialer was simpler. There's just a lot of like little bits and pieces that I do think added up to something genuinely.
It's the refined
new
version of the big idea.
Yeah. Which is
that refinement. For me, that refinement counts for a lot.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah, we can't give it credit for being pink. We should say, like Andrew learned in his video, this is a limited edition one, and we're very proud of this. But we don't get credit for being pink because it wasn't at first, but that was also a big deal. The idea that there were new colors, they did lots of different designs. There was one called the Princess, like lots of new ideas about what a phone should mean in people's lives that I think did start here. Question number 2, was this either remarkably good or remarkably bad?
It's remarkably good. That's the answer.
I think it was. I realized about halfway through the episode, I had not expected this thing to get into the Hall of Fame, and it just obviously is.
Yeah, it's obviously going to the Hall of Fame.
This thing is very important. It's like why we're here, but also I think it's not only is it very important, like we picked this to sort of mark a moment in a bigger story, but I do think this thing is more of a moment in that story than I realized when I started this process.
I mean, also they shipped it unchanged for 40 years.
I know.
Like you're just kind of like, well, it goes in.
Yeah. Imagine if you were still using an iPhone 1 because it was good enough. It did the thing. Like that's crazy. What's funny is we never got to test the theory because like there was no competition. It wasn't useful to compete with this. Nobody tried because you couldn't get into the network.
Connect to the network.
Yeah, there was only one company making this. And like we said, they had incentives to make it good. They had incentives to make people like it and use it. There were lots of reasons that it is as good as it is. But it is a fun sort of counter history. What if there had been honest to God free market competition much sooner? Would somebody have done a much better job than this much sooner?
I mean, you can see that the second that the phone jack hit, like all bets were off.
Yeah,
but do you want a weird cordless phone? Like we'll send you one.
It's almost a shame that we didn't get a longer run of the telephone before it became all these other things, because like telephone innovation essentially sort of dies at the hands of all these other new things that are being invented, and everybody goes and finds more exciting things to work on, like computers and televisions and all these. So it's not like there is some multi-generational, fascinating new kind of telephone over the years, which I think is one of the reasons this thing lives as long as it does, is that even when other stuff comes along, it's not like there are 100 brand new ideas about how to make phone calls.
I feel like we're going to have to do the entire episode on that one Panasonic answering machine that they used in the movie Sneakers. Like I made sure that my family had that answering machine.
Yeah.
It was overshadowed. I agree with you.
Yes,
it was
overshadowed is a good way.
But it did continue for quite a long time.
Yeah, I agree. All right, and then question number 3, and I think this might actually be the easiest one of the 3. Did this thing have a lasting impact? Did it, capital M, matter?
You know what? On this answer, it's like no.
Really?
It did, but it was like forced on the American public, and so I think matter is when it impacts the culture on its own merits.
Yeah. The way we've been describing it is like, is there a world before this and a world after it?
Yeah.
And you don't think so?
No, I mean it was just like this is a phone, like that's the moon. Like it's just there it is. Like does it matter? Like yeah, it's pretty important.
Sure.
But like it doesn't warp the culture around it in a way that the iPhone like is like paramount on this list, right?
Yeah.
Like the culture warps around the iPhone in like a very specific way.
It's an interesting point.
I think this was just like given to America. Like here it is.
Right. And I think that's actually a really interesting point because not that long before this, we were still in this is a growth phase. This is a new thing. People don't understand. Like we're in this sort of steady march of this technology into people's lives. But I think you're right. At this point, this was ubiquitous.
Right. The things I'm saying about it that are very important, right? This is when it became a consumer product. This is when people would have more than one of them in their house. This is when you could pick it up by this handle, which I am just addicted to doing. Like all that stuff is very important, but it's not my relationship to the phone has changed or I'm changing my behavior around this phone. I still think it goes in the Hall of Fame, but like to me, the matter question is always it centers around did the culture change noticeably after the thing? And we've done a bunch of episodes about things where we talk about it so directly we don't even notice that's what we're talking about. The culture changed around the TiVo that we have sitting over there. It changed around the iPhone. Did the culture change around this? Like it's in a bunch of movies. But the way that we all use the phone remained essentially the same until the network was opened up.
Well, it's an interesting design fact of it, right? And this goes back to, like, I spent a lot of time reading about Henry Dreyfuss, who I find totally fascinating. And maybe that was his great achievement, right? Was what he did was discover what people wanted and what culture was and hand them the perfect thing to do that. He didn't deliver some brand new idea about how everything was supposed to work. He just like nestled this thing perfectly into your life, which is itself a huge achievement, but is not that kind of like it doesn't create an inflection point.
Yeah.
It just immediately makes this thing feel completely natural in your house.
Yeah.
Which is a very different way of thinking about innovation, but is, I think, in many ways just as innovative. Like to build a thing that immediately feels like you've had it forever is very hard to do.
Yeah. What it reflected was the power of the network. Like the network obviously matters, right? And this is the way to access the network that AT&T is instructing you to do. Like, because you're not making a choice, I think the matters question gets very difficult.
Yeah. So, okay. So just to be clear, you think the answer to number 3 is no, but you still want to put it in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, absolutely. This is like, what do you want from me?
Listen,
I'm not here to make your job simple,
The
David.
people out there who say the Hall of Fame needs stricter rules are going to have a field day with this one.
It's obviously in the Hall of Fame. I'm just the point that I'm making is that the element of choice makes the matter question so much different. You can obviously make the argument that this thing matters, capital M.
Sure.
My rubric is that it's when everyone's behavior changes by choice.
Yes.
That's when you win.
Yeah,
but
I think
obviously
that's right.
it goes in the Hall of Fame.
Okay, I think
this thing represents like every idea we've ever had at The Verge.
I know, I'm with you. We're going to put it in for that reason, and also because I keep looking at the shot that we're doing here, and we've done a lot of these episodes now. Nothing has ever looked as good on the desk as this phone.
You see
does.
what I'm saying?
Like as just an object.
Yeah.
I am in love with this thing.
Yeah, everything else like a black rectangle.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's yeah. So for that reason alone, it gets in.
Yeah.
We're bending the
It
rules.
looks sick.
Yeah, listen.
Secret fourth category.
This is why Hall of Fame rules are famously secretive, because it's just a bunch of men with bad ideas.
Yeah, 500. Western Electric 500 in, Bill Belichick out. You know what I'm saying?
Feels good to me.
Yeah.
All right, Nilay, thank you. This
is amazing.
This has been a delight. Nothing like having a reason to talk about monopolies for an hour and a half. You know what I mean? Thank you again to Tim Wu for being here. Read The Master Switch. Read The Age of Extraction. Follow him in all of his many internet travails. If you want to support all of this that we're doing, the best thing you can do is subscribe to The Verge, theverge.com/subscribe. It's how we get to do all of this. It's also how you get all of our podcasts, including this one, ad-free. Thank you again. We'll see you next time.